Firstly, welcome. My name's Howard Johns and my wife Deborah Keir. And this morning, I'd like to welcome you. Thanks for coming. We're going to be talking a bit about our barge and retirement and what we've been doing. How to spend our retirement. Lots of people have different views of what retirement's going to be for them. And about 10 years ago, 8 years ago, Deb and I started to think about what we wanted to do for retirement. And I came home from work one night and we're having dinner. And over the dinner table, Deb said, when we retire, why don't we buy a barge and go to Europe? And I just instantly said, yes, let's do it. After she sort of picked herself up off the floor, she said, what do you mean? You're not even going to think about it? It wasn't a very hard thing for me to think about. It sounded great. Why barging? We love exploring new places. We love going and looking around. Both very keen cyclists. I'm a very keen freshwater fisherman, the fish lakes and rivers. Deb's a very keen photographer. We could live aboard, avoiding the expense of accommodation. We love a challenge and adventure, and obviously going to new countries with new cultures, the language, looking after a boat, working out where to go and how to get there. Good weather, good food. Obviously, I'll digress a little bit here. When we first mentioned barges, I grew up in the UK, and a barge to me was a 7-foot wide, 60-foot narrowboat. And when Deb said barging, she didn't really say what sort of barge it was or where we would go. I assumed it was going to be a narrowboat in the UK. But when she started talking about good weather and good food, I sort of, we had differing views. And we went through a process to resolve that, and we'll talk about that a little bit. Barging, we avoid long road trips. Deb doesn't enjoy road trips, doesn't enjoy driving too far. So barging, although we do have some long trips, it's slightly different. And in fact, it's a lot different. It's very, very much more, you can walk around, you can talk, you can make tea, lunch, whatever you want to do. We can take our time. We don't have to, in fact, people often ask us, where are you going? We usually have a route, but we don't have a detailed schedule. We know where we were starting from and we know where we want to end up at the end of the year. We'll meet new friends and entertain existing friends. And that to me is probably entertaining our existing friends is one of the great things about our lifestyle. It's fabulous to have visitors and to share it with family and friends. Europe has first world facilities. As we get older, we all need our creature comforts, and obviously medical and care is something that's important. All of Europe has great facilities, as opposed, and both Deb and I, we're all getting on. We're over camping, we're over roughing it, so we want first world facilities. And the other concept that we had was we'd have an endless summer. We'd spend 6 months in Europe and then come back here for 6 months. So we generally plan to leave round about April or late March, April, and then get back here in October. So have continual summers. So not quite a grey nomad around Australia, chasing the sun, but chasing the sun around the globe. Oh, okay, that's up. No, it's not down, down. Let's talk about some of the countries. If you look at Europe from a canal perspective and rivers, there are thousands and thousands of kilometres of waterways. If you take the Netherlands, the blue lines are the canals and the red lines are the main rivers. Belgium is often called the Delta of the Rhine, and it's exactly what it is. The Rhine River comes out of Europe from the mountains, and actually deposits its silt and everything out into Holland, and has several major rivers. Belgium also has some major rivers, not as many, and it also has some pretty major canals. So we were going to go Netherlands, Belgium, and of course, our ultimate destination, which is France. And France has a fantastic network of canals, mostly built by Napoleon. So they're very old, but they're all serviceable. And you've also got some major waterways. You can spend a lot of time up in the the northeast of France, Reims, Nancy, Saint-Jean-de-Lons. But you've also got the Rhone River that comes straight down and comes down to the Mediterranean. And then you've got across at the bottom of France, southern France, you've got the Canal du Midi, which probably most of you have heard of, the ultimate boating mecca, Toulouse. And in fact, you can go right the way across to Bordeaux. So France was our destination. And obviously we've both learning French and looking forward to getting there. Previous experience? Not really. This is the first boat other than a small 3-metre tinny that I've ever owned. Deb sailed dinghies as a young woman and had a good sailing knowledge. But now we own a 45-tonne, 22-metre long boat with no keel. By no keel, I mean it's flat bottomed. And we'll show you some photographs later. Flat bottom brings some challenges, and we'll talk about those as we move through. So it's going to be a very steep learning curve for us. Like being good project managers that we are, we put together a plan. And when we first started this, it was around about 2012. My son was still at high school and he finished high school in 2016. So we were committed to have to stay till then, till he finished VCE and started uni. So our cruising wanted to commence in 2017. So we had a few years to get ourselves organised. So we started learning French. Deb retired in 2013 and she did a photographic diploma, which she thoroughly enjoyed. And then we started thinking about what sort of boat we wanted. And then, as opposed to now at the moment, there were hundreds of boats on the market. But every boat and every canal boat that we look at is different. So we needed to develop some criteria and we started looking online. And remember, we're 12,000 miles away and we're trying to buy effectively a boat online. So, but we did, we were very fortunate and we found a boat quite quickly on the internet that we really, really loved. And I'll hand over to Deb now and she'll explain the process that we went through for this.
So we saw a barge on the internet called Condor. We'd actually looked at her before, but we'd realised that the master bedroom was a long way from the bathroom, which at our age, we didn't really like. So we hadn't really considered her, but we saw she sort of disappeared and she reappeared and we had another look at her and we actually realised that she would actually meet most of our requirements. Next slide, Howard. So the first thing was she was the right shape to go to nearly all the canals that we wanted to go to. So she's only 3 meters tall, which means that she would fit under most of the bridges in France. And in fact, the previous owners had gone all the way down the Canal du Midi, which many barges are too tall to fit under a couple of those bridges. Second thing is she's not too deep. So some of the canals are quite shallow and she would still go down those canals. So that was really important for us. Next slide, please. The second thing is we wanted a wheelhouse, a large wheelhouse with good views. So this barge that we're looking at actually has the kitchen and the dining room in the wheelhouse, and it has spectacular big windows all the way around. So we've got views out and we spend a lot of time in that room. So we've got the views of what's happening around us, which is, of course, while we're there. Next slide, please. The other thing is, being Australian, we like an outdoor lifestyle. So we wanted a large deck, or at least the deck that could hold a table and chairs for 4 people so we could spend time outside. This barge actually has a 5-meter long deck. And so that makes it beautiful for that. We also wanted a walk around bed, which this is the original master bedroom. I'm actually showing you the photos from the ads that we saw on the internet. So this is the bed. It's a walk around bed. It's more of a shuffle around bed, but at least you don't have to crawl over the other person. And we wanted plenty of storage. This is the lounge room or the salon, they call it, which has big cupboards all the way along the side. Next. Well, storage, as I said, was really important. Howard, being a fisherman, has a lot of fishing gear. So this has a big storage area at the front of the boat where he could turn that into basically his fishing storage, as well as having all the stuff for the boat. Next. So it had a serviceable bathroom, which is important. Interestingly, the toilet is on a sort of a plinth, which it's needed for the mechanics of the toilet, which was very strange, but still worked.
You really are sitting on the throne.
Yeah. Your legs not even touching the floor. So next, Howard. And this room was very strange. These are the advertising images. You can see they've really dressed it up to attract customers. And we worked out after quite a little thinking that this room was at the rear of the boat next to the bathroom, and we could convert it into a master bedroom. It had originally been 2 bedrooms, and they'd sort of half put it together, and it was just a very weird sort of storage room where they kept the microwave and the freezer, and I think if their grandkids came to stay, they stayed there. It was a very strange room. Next. So we used these 2 photos, which were in the advertising. You can see the same rug, and we worked out that that room was actually next to the bathroom. And on the left photo shows a diesel heater, which basically took up the whole of this very strange little hallway area, which we thought was a bit odd. But anyway, next slide. So after looking at it, we got in touch with the people in the Netherlands, and I ended up going over to the Netherlands. And we worked out that we could actually transform that back area of the boat into our master bedroom and have more things. So we actually purchased the boat, and at that point, Howard hadn't actually seen her in person. So he trusted me to make the decision for us. Next. So originally we'd been planning to spend 3 weeks in September 2015 looking for a boat. But now we had those 3 weeks, which the first thing we did was we completed a 2-day course, because you actually need a license to drive a boat that's that big. And then we went to the Netherlands to see the boat. I was very nervous, because what if Howard didn't like it? But luckily he did.
My only thoughts of when we first walked up to it, I thought, my God, it's bloody huge.
So we had a handover from the previous owner, and then we set it up and cruised for 2 weeks. And we really thought that was important to understand a bit more about the boat and what we wanted to change, given that we were going to do a refit the following year. And we also had major problems with the engine cooling that year, which meant that we had to leave the boat somewhere other than we had planned. But we did finalise what we wanted with the refit, and we met the refit team. So the little green line there that you can see at the top is just the distance that we travelled in that year. The yellow lines is the border between the countries, and we've got some stars there of country towns. So we just had a very relatively small cruise, but we learned a lot about what we didn't know about cruising and what we wanted in order to live on the boat. Next. So the refit, we completely refitted the rear of the boat to make a new master bedroom, a new bathroom and laundry. Howard decided he didn't like the bathroom that we had, so we included that in the refit. We added a pigeon hatch, I'll show you a photo in a moment, to replace the 2 skylights that had been in the 2 bedrooms. We reinstalled 2 portholes in the rear of the master bedroom. At some stage in the life of the boat, they had been sealed up. We removed the heater in the hall for more storage, and we replaced chain steering, which had gone above our heads and reduced the height of the ceiling. We installed automatic identification system and a depth sounder. We relayed the instrument panel to make it easier. And luckily the people that did that put all the instructions in English rather than in Dutch. We replaced the engine wiring. We upgraded the domestic electrics so that everything worked. Previously, we'd had a few times when it had shorted out on us. And we repainted the outside of the boat with a new colour scheme, which suited us much better. So we'd gone from sort of rusty orange, a very Dutch colour, to just blue and white. And we renamed her Moondance rather than being named for Condor, an American bird of prey. Next. Can you start that, Howard?
How do I do that?
Just try.
Ah, here you go.
So I put together, we were worried that we had a refit team working in Holland who didn't speak English as a first language and were 12,000 miles away. So we actually learnt SketchUp and put together plans for what we wanted to make it very clear to them what we were hoping for when they did. And luckily, that's pretty much what we got. So that seemed to be a good plan. You can go to the next one, Howard. So this is where the boat was moored during the refit. It's moored against a dredger on a very busy and fast-flowing river. So it was quite an unusual spot to choose to do the refit, but anyway, that's what they decided to do. Next. So this is some before and after photos. So this is what the area at the back of the boat looked like before we did the refit. Next. Next. We had that completely taken out. They went right back to the steel hull. And you can see there.
At the back, you can see the two brown panels. That's where the portholes were covered up, where we reinstalled two new portholes.
And also in there, you can see the drive shaft. Do you want to point with your mouse, Howard? The drive shaft.
I can get it to work. The drive shaft is through there, goes out through the back of the boat there. This is the exhaust, and the exhaust comes all the way from the engine and goes out to the back of the boat, and that's a greaser.
And the other bobbly thing on the left is an automatic greaser that greases the drive shaft. So that all had to go under our bed. Next slide, please. So this was, sorry, go back. So that was the picture we had of what we wanted the room to look like. And the next picture is what we got, which we were really happy with. It was very, very close to what we'd asked for. Next. So just a couple of other photos of our living space, our bedroom. Next. That's my desk where I work on my photos. Next. That's all within the living space. And this is then putting in the new pigeon hatch, which was replacing, I think you can see the two brown patches, which is where they closed over the two skylights that had been there before. And that's putting in the new pigeon hatch. Next. So the top photo shows you the two skylights on the deck, and the bottom photo shows how it looked after we'd put in the new pigeon hatch. So we were able to have a table over the pigeon hatch, which really cleared the deck up for walking around and so forth. Next. And that's the new bathroom that we put in. You can't see it, but just on the right, there's a shower. And as you can see, we've got a full-size washing machine there. And we also have our freezer in underneath there. So it's actually sort of tucked in under the end of the wheelhouse. Next. And that's where the old heater was. We now had room for a cupboard and extra shelves, which was wonderful. And as you can see there on the left, we've got hydronic heating radiators in every room, which means that in winter, that people that owned it before us lived on it all year. I think we were the first people that didn't live on it all year. So a really good boat for winter. Next. It's you, Howard.
We're going to talk a bit about the technical things. On the boat, it's a diesel boat. Originally, the boat was a sailing boat and got converted in the early 1970s. And when they converted it in, they put the bottom main engine, which is a 90 horsepower Volvo Penta. It's right in the middle of the boat. So we have a very long drive shaft, about 8.5 meters, and also quite a long wet exhaust. The engine's water cooled from the outside. It doesn't provide any problem. It's what's called keel cooling, and that provides cooling as you're moving along. The water circulates around the keel by a set of pipes and chills the water down, but it's closed, so we don't get any weed or rubbish or anything else through the cooling system of the engine. We do have what's called a wet exhaust, and that does pump water from outside, goes through a filter, and that actually pumps water from one end of the exhaust right the way through to the other. So as the engine's running, and the engine heats up, the water cools the exhaust down so nothing sets on fire. There have been a few cases of barges catching fire because the exhaust gets too hot. So that's the main engine. Above it, the blue engine, that's our generator. That's a Lister Peter generator. A lot of the time we're roaming around the rivers and lakes, and there aren't places for us to plug in. In a lot of respects, our barge is very much like a big caravan. We front up to a mooring. There's an electrical power point there. We plug it in and we use what we call shore power. And that's fine. And that'll automatically charge our batteries. Everything on the boat runs through an inverter and a set of batteries. And there's our batteries. We've got the grey ones there on the right, on the left photo on the right. Let me just put, if I can get my mouse. Those there are our domestic batteries. We've got 6 220 amp hour batteries, and they last us probably, if we didn't do anything else but run everything off our batteries, we could probably last for 24 hours. If it was a really, really cloudy day where we weren't getting any sun. Because we've also, when we upgraded all the electrics, we also put solar panels on. So we've actually got solar, and when it's nice and sunny, solar will adequately charge all our batteries up from running overnight, our hot water, our cooking, and we'll be 100% full again by sort of midday. The black batteries are our traction starter motor engine, and that silver tank at the back there, that's our black water tank. We currently store on board around about 3,500 litres of water. When she's full, and we store about 400 litres of black water. And that blue pump over the back there, that's our pump to pump it out when we need to clean it out. So the red on the right, the photo, that's our central heating. It's a full domestic central heating system. For a small boat, our boat, as Deb mentioned before, is hydronically heated. And it's warm and toasty, and it really is. In fact, we took one radiator out because it was too much. We've also got a diesel-fired heater in the lounge, which we don't use very often because we're there in the summer and not the winter. But it will be nice in the winter when we're there. So you're very conscious of electricity supply on a boat, because we've really got multiple sources of electricity. You can, the objective is to keep the batteries charged. We use solar. We can plug it into shore power, which the battery charger will kick in and charge up our batteries. We have charging from the alternators when the engine is running. So when we're cruising, the engine will actually charge our batteries up. And also, we've got our generator. If we need to actually generate some power to charge our batteries, we can. So sometimes if we're consuming a significant amount, like we're cooking dinner, we may run the generator for an hour a night just to charge up, to keep the batteries charged up. Our biggest consumption of electricity on the boat is our hot water. We have a very small 60-litre hot water cylinder. But it's enough for 2 showers, and it is nice and hot. Our only issue is if we have guests, we have to work out a shower roster. Unfortunately, a lot of people like to shower in the morning, and a lot of people like to shower in the evening. So we just work out who's showering when, and that's your allocated slot. So, and it works fine. But it is by far the biggest consumer of electricity that we have on the boat. There's our nice new inverter and all our nice new wiring. As Deb said, when we took the boat over, it was the guy that actually owned the boat was a mechanic, and he had done a lot of tinkering, and there was all sorts of things connected to the boat, and some of them weren't that safe. So we basically replaced all of the domestic wiring to do with the mains power supplies. And there's our switch box for our 230 volts. There's our isolating transformer, which gives you some protection from the outside. And the little blue box down there, that's our solar generator. That's our solar panels are wired direct to that, which feeds from there back into the quattro and actually then puts power back into our batteries.
And there's even a heater in the engine room.
Yeah, as you can see, there's a nice panel heater in there which keeps the engine warm when you're not running the engine, because it does get a bit warm in there when the engine's running. But it's a really good engine room. It's a good workspace. It's about a metre high. You can't stand up in it, but you can sit down and work comfortably on your knees as well. And most of the mechanics that I've had on board actually quite like it. So it's quite a good space compared to some of the boats they work on. So 2017 comes along, and our first cruising system, and we're both very, very excited. The kids are our two children. We moved my daughter out. She went and got an apartment, and my son was, for the first year, lived upstairs in our. We've got a self-contained apartment upstairs, and we put our house onto Airbnb. So we were off. First cruising. When we arrived on the boat, we had a lot of work to do, because the boat, although it was finished, it wasn't quite finished. And we had a lot of admin type things to do. We had to sort out our visas. We had to set up for living. We had multiple trips to IKEA. We put curtains up. We had some issues painting the boat. We bought bikes. We did bank accounts, phones, internet, all sorts of things. We also replaced our cooker. We found out pretty quickly that the cooker that we had on board, which was a full integrated hob and oven, every time we try and used it, even though we had a very good power source now, it was still far too big for the boat and kept tripping everything. So we replaced that. We bought outdoor furniture. We had some issues with the engine and the generator, all which, just minor mechanical issues, which we got fixed. And we replaced the bow thruster. Now, Lynn asked us before whether we had a bow thruster. On a boat our size at 22 metres, a bow thruster at slow speeds allows you to change the direction of the front of the boat very easily. And it just squirts water from one side through a tube and pushes you from either left or port to starboard or left to right, depending on what you want to go. But our batteries for that needed to replacing. We also replaced our throttle. For a boat our size, and given that we were newbies, to actually drive it without a bow thruster is a challenge. Not impossible, but it's a real challenge. Unfortunately, just before we were due to start cruising at full speed ahead, Deb broke her wrist. She fell over on the back deck, hanging out the washing, and fractured her arm in 3 places, as well as her left elbow. So that really put a dent into it. But fortunately, we had additional crew at the time, and we were on what we called our shakedown cruise and ironing out all the bugs. So they were also qualified boaties, so they helped us. But what it did mean for the next couple of months was that we could not move the boat without having guests on board. So we'd have to spend, and we had a few guests booked in, so we'd have to spend a week or so at a place, but we'd use local trains and buses and to continue our ventures and go elsewhere. Not by the boat, but just by public transport and our bikes, because Deb learnt to ride her bike. During the time we were there, we visited the town where the boat was originally located, and the family who had the boat built. The boat was originally built in 1925, and as I said, it was a sailing boat, and its main job was to ship peat. They used to cut peat up in Friesland and then ship it down to the major cities. We met the children of the gentleman that refitted the boat. The boat was converted in the early 1970s, and that was a really emotional time for them. They'd lived on the boat for about 10 years when they were younger. They sort of moved away when they went to university and high school and that sort of stuff. But they were very emotional. and their kids, they got to show their kids the boat, and they actually never thought they'd see it again. So they were thrilled to bits. And in fact, I've got an agreement with the granddaughter. She's at uni becoming a lawyer, and she basically doesn't want us to sell the boat. When we sell the boat, we've got to give her a call because she wants to buy it. so we'll wait and see what happens there. And we'll move along. Here's our route that we had that year. As I said, we started that year in Harderhaven, which is in the middle of the Netherlands, and we went north. That little loop there was what we did for our shakedown cruise, and Deb broke her wrist about there. that was a couple of week cruise, and we came back to the same place. Had a barbecue for the crew that had upgraded all the boat, and then we headed up north. We stopped out here for a couple of weeks while we didn't have crew, and we tripped all around Friesland and having a good look. We went up across to Groningen, and then we come all the way down the Netherlands, down to Maastricht, which is right on the border. I had a commitment that I had to be in Belgium to help manage the New Zealand fishing team in September. So we needed to be back. I needed to be back down here. So we got to Namur, and I left Deb for a couple of weeks on the boat, went off and did that. And then when I came back, we went across to Belgium, through Ghent, Bruges, and that year we left the boat in Dixmude. I don't know whether anybody's been to that part of the world, very steeped in history for the First World War. And in fact, Dixmude, there wasn't a building left standing in Dixmude after the First World War, and they totally rebuilt it. And it's very, very, very steeped in history. And we spent a fair bit of time in Dixmude, and we spent even more time in Ypres, which we'll talk about that shortly. But as you can see, you cover distance, but that took us 6 months. There's our luggage. The first day we arrived, our new mattresses, and we both booked in extra suitcases because we took a whole lot of stuff with us, as you do. And that's what the boat was like when we arrived. I mentioned we had some issues with painting. Our project manager in the Netherlands, and she was fabulous, Mandy, she had hired a Polish group to do the painting for us. Quite cheap labour, but they do a good job. Unfortunately, they had some issues, some health issues within their family. One of the guys had a baby, which unfortunately passed away, so they had to go back to Poland to be with the family at that time, and they never finished the painting. So we actually got a couple of local guys came in and helped us, and we all clubbed in and we painted the boat together to get it finished. So, but as you can see, I think Kevin asked a question before, we didn't take the boat out of the water to paint. We used all sorts of things to, as I said, collect stuff, and we don't have a car on the boat. Occasionally we might hire a car to go away, but we use the bikes for everything. And here, that's actually an outdoor table that we bought online, and getting stuff delivered to a boat is even more problematic. You don't have a fixed address, so trying to get somebody to come and deliver you something can be difficult. Not impossible. So usually you deliver it to the harbour master, and he'll look after it for you. But again, you have to tee that up and make sure that all happens. But we use bikes to carry all sorts of things, and we do shopping on our bikes. Deb and I have got two new bikes, and we've got panniers on the back of the bike. And what we do is we stack the panniers into the shopping trolley. And when our 4 bags are full, our shopping's done. And we load up the bike and head home. Here's Captain Deb. Let me just say that Deb is the main helmsman of the boat. She has an uncanny knack and an ability to drive the boat and put it exactly where it needs to go without hitting anything. And that's an important fact.
And how it doesn't.
I don't have that watercraft that she has. So I tend to be the lackey on the ropes to moor us up, which is good because Deb can't throw a rope far. And you do need you don't need a lot of strength, but you do need some strength to do that. So generally, if we're cruising, a day's cruising, Deb will take her out wherever we are. I'll unmoor her and off we go. And Deb will then hand over to me. We'll do some distance, and then we're going to moor up. Deb will take over again, and I will do the ropes. But as you can see, it's a bit chilly in the Netherlands in March, April. So you know, plenty of warm clothes are needed. There's our barge moored up in a harbour in Kampen. I don't know if anybody knows the Netherlands, but Netherlands is a beautiful country, and in fact, we were absolutely amazed at how beautiful it is, and we loved it. The Dutch people are just so friendly, and everything works, and it really is a pleasure. It's a lovely country to be in. As you can see, our flag, the flag on the back of our boat is a Dutch flag. We are actually a Dutch registered boat, and on the Dutch kadaster, which is the Dutch barge registration. Here's some photos, one of the town gates for Kampen. And here's Deb being wheeled off to hospital after she fell off. Unfortunately, we could not lift her off the boat to take her to hospital, so we had to ring an ambulance. And in fact, I'll tell you a little funny story. Deb's the ultimate project manager, and as she's lying on the ground with a broken wrist, and you could tell it was broken because it was at very odd angles, one of the guys that was with us, Peter, he said, "Oh, Deb, what do you want us to do? What do you want us to do?" And she said, "Okay, this is what I want you to do." He said, "Peter, you take some photos." So he was taking photos. Deb, who was the other lady who was with us, you get me some drugs because I want some painkillers. And Howard, you organise to get the ambulance here for me. So, and she was issuing her instructions lying on the floor. Here's a very nice sunset picture set in the middle of Friesland. Absolutely beautiful. In the middle of nowhere, you have all these moorings that you can just, you buy a flag, a bit like a roving caravan really, and you can moor up. Absolutely gorgeous. Pretty spectacular rainbow photo. Here's a bridge with a big commercial. We share the waterways with a very large fleet of commercial barges. Not a lot of people realise how much material gets shipped around Europe on large boats. This boat here is 100 metres long and 10 metres wide. We think we're big, but when you go past these guys, they're huge. So, but we have to respect them. They respect us. We have VHF radio, and we communicate with them, and we stay out their way, and they stay out of our way, which is really good. A more sedate waterway. This is in the northern of Holland. As you can see, that we're currently waiting for a lock, and there's 4 boats in that lock down below. The water level will come up, they'll come out past us, and then we'll head into the lock and shut the gates at the other end. There's 4 boats in there waiting to come through. When we went in, we're the only boat that fits, and we only just fitted, so it's not a particularly big lock. Not many locks in the Netherlands, many more bridges than locks, as opposed to France, which has more locks. Cruising outside. Our barge has a steering position outside, so we can get outside and enjoy the daylight. And although it's a bit sunny without a canopy, but we've fixed the canopy, and we'll show you some photos of that later. But Captain Deb's on board again. Much more summer attire this time. There's our back deck, as Deb said before, a table and 4 chairs around the side, and that's our little party tent. That was what we bought to actually give us some shade, to give us some protection from the sun. It does get quite warm, but we did decide in the end that although our party tent worked really well, we did want to get a canopy and a bimini across the front of the boat so we could actually get more shade. Great to entertain people there in the evening out on the back deck. Very pleasant. There's our solar panels too at the front. Barging's not without its technical challenges, and here's Deb solving one of our technical challenges in a river in Belgium. Our water intake underneath got a bit bunged up with some rubbish, a polythene bag, and Deb's under there trying to get rid of it, which she did. It was a cold, dirty river, But she's a better swimmer than I am. Well, that was my excuse anyway. Okay, I'll hand over to Deb.
Okay, so 2018, I felt like in the first year we didn't know what we didn't know, and it was good fun. In the second year, we knew what we didn't know was scary. Anyway, we decided to go back to the Netherlands because we'd sort of rushed through after my accident, and there was so much more to see, and the Netherlands had been just delightful. So many beautiful little towns to visit. During the winter, we got new bollards at the rear and side just to help with mooring. But unfortunately, I fractured my shoulder in a bike accident just before we left the first port. But luckily, after about a week, I could drive the boat. In fact, when we went to the hospital, they said that it wasn't fractured. And it wasn't until 3 weeks later that we found that it actually was fractured. So I was doing all these things I probably shouldn't have been for 3 weeks. We stayed at Ypres for most of that time, and we were there for Anzac Day, which was lovely to do, especially since it was the 100th anniversary of the end of the First World War. We mentioned we joined the Barge Association. Well, they had a rally in Ghent, and we went back for that. We didn't take the boat, but we went, and we just had a fabulous time meeting lots of people who also own barges and talking everything barge. Now that year it was actually quite hot, and the Netherlands had lots of problems due to the heat and the low water levels. Some of the bridges got either stuck open or stuck closed. And some of the locks, they had to stop using them because it was introducing too much salt water into farming areas. We bought some more things for the house. I had my 60th birthday that year. And at the end of the year, we ordered canopy bimini for the back deck. And we returned to the marina where we originally saw the boat. So back in the Netherlands. So here's another chart of where we went that year, starting at Ypres down the bottom, and we worked our way up and spent quite a bit of time in the sort of heart of the Netherlands. Rotterdam, some of the major cities, Rotterdam, Den Haag, Leiden, Haarlem, Amsterdam, Utrecht, which was just beautiful. Next. So this is when I hurt my shoulder, I couldn't drive the boat and we needed to get to the next town. So luckily we knew some people in the next town and they had a car. So Sarah drove the other 3 down to us and helped move the boat to Ypres, which is a delightful town where we're actually moored at the moment. Next. We had more troubles with that raw water coming into the boat, and this is Howard with Barry trying to solve that problem again. And they developed some quite ingenious devices which should have worked but unfortunately didn't. Next.
We'll explain why they didn't work shortly.
So that's just the new dining room table and chairs we bought, a trip to IKEA in Belgium. Next.
They delivered to the side of the boat, which was really good because I couldn't have quite got all those on the bike.
And this is the rally we went to with all the barges. So as you can see, I don't know how many, there's about 20 barges there. So it was just great to be able to share stories and everything with them. Next. So this is one of the locks in Belgium. That one was probably, 8 meters tall. We took this photo because the boat's still coming out, but it's got a green light. Normally that traffic light system tells you when it's safe for you to go, but in this particular instance, it wasn't working and it was green even when the lock doors were closed. Next. And this is some of the big traffic we found on the canals in Belgium. In the Netherlands, there's so many canals, you can pretty much get off the canals that have the big boats. But in Belgium, the big boats seem to be everywhere. And these 2 boats passed each other as they passed us, which was a little bit scary. Next. Just some friends on the back of our boat. Just showing what a great spot it is to be able to, sit outside in the sun and have friends and people over. Next. Howard, of course, ever the fisherman, he loves to fish. And so anytime he can, he'll take a morning off and do that. And it suits me because I can stroll around, take photos. So quite a good match in terms of hobbies. Next.
I want to look at that. I'm missing it.
Next. And we had hot weather, so of course there was swimming. We wouldn't swim generally in a canal, but we would swim in a lake. And so we used the boys on the boat as our toys to just float around and stay cool. It was about 38 degrees that day. Next. And this is Howard going into a lock. Well, we're moored up at a lock and I'm playing around with my camera as usual. Next. And this is, we actually have a washing line on the back of the boat. So I just like this photo. It's very domestic with the clothes hanging off the back of the boat. Next. Just another shot, friends on the back of the boat as we're driving and they're just having a cold drink or something on the back. Next. And this is our bikes. You can see on the back of Howard's bike, he's got a pannier there, and you know, we use these bikes pretty much every day. Next. Over to you, Howard. I think you're going to have to be pretty quick, Howard.
That's all right. Well, okay, 2019 was a bit of a change of plan for us for some reasons that we'll explain. We set out a little bit later this year because my son turned 21. So we went, his birthday was the 6th of May and we left about the 9th of May. So we got there a little bit late. We installed our new canopy in Bimini. And as Deb said, by now we're getting very used to the lifestyle of barging and how everything works. And we just loved it. You know, our first 2 years had been fantastic, and we were really looking now at setting our mind on getting to France. So our destination was Dole in France, and we were all set to go. So we had some issues with our domestic batteries. One overheated, which we actually ended up having to get the whole set replaced. We did a bit of a deal with them. And again, we are a mechanical machine, and it's not without its problems. So we had a stern gland leaking. Sounds painful, but you know, it's where the drive shaft goes outside to the boat. It's the only open place in the boat where you can get leaks, apart from other, apart from some inlets and outlets. But it was leaking water into the boat as the engine, as the drive shaft was turning. Not a huge problem, just filled up the bilge with water quite regularly, and something that we wanted to get fixed. This year we did take our barge to Den Bosch, and also it was a special year for us because our barge every 7 years needs to be surveyed. They take the boat out of the water, they do a hull check, a thickness check, and they do a safety check right the way mechanically and make sure you've got all your safety equipment on board as well. And we identified for our barge, we had 25 things to rectify, and a lot of them were very, very small and got fixed very easily. A couple of them were a little bit bigger. Our drive shaft, and one of the reasons it's probably leaking a bit of water is it had a bit of movement in it, about 1.5 millimeters, which we had to get a new bearing put in for it. So one stage there, we thought we might have to take the drive shaft out, but we didn't have to. So that was all good. So we got the survey done, and then we headed off cruising, and we headed to Antwerp. We bought another fridge. As I said, the first year we had a huge number of guests. The second year we didn't have that many guests, but one of the issues that we found was keeping the beer cold and the wine cold. We didn't quite have enough room with a small fridge, so we decided to get another fridge. And because they're so energy efficient, it didn't really matter too much. However, it became pretty obvious as we were cruising that we were going to have to change our plans because the water levels in many of the canals that were leading into France were becoming very low. That they are suffering from climate change, and the amount of rainfall that they're getting now is significantly lower. And quite a lot of the canals getting into France and out of France closed towards the end of the season. So unless you're there early in the season, you can't get through. And we weren't planning to get there until August. So we had to start planning our routes. Deb had another bike accident, and broke her arm. Again, so we've had three seasons on the boat, and we've had 3 trips to hospital with 3 broken bones. And everybody kept saying to Deb, "Oh, you must have osteoporosis. You must get your bone density checked." And Deb's response to that is, and she doesn't have osteoporosis. She just has a very, oh, what's happened there? Has a very active, has a very active lifestyle. We did have some really hot weather, and we'll show you some photos in a minute. We had a few 40-degree days. Although we weren't going to end in France because we decided to go back to Ypres, we did get into France. So we finally got to France on the Sambre River, and we cruised the Roubaix, the Lys, and then we headed north up to Dunkirk and then across that way. And we returned to Belgium at the end of the year. We did do some cruising, which was really great, through the historic boat lifts in Belgium. There's a construction in Belgium that the EU built called the Strepiteur, which is a boat lift, and I'll show you some photos. But basically our route was in white. We headed down from just south of Amsterdam, and we came back through Rotterdam, down through Antwerp. Antwerp is the biggest inland, well, it's the 2nd biggest port in the world, isn't it?
In Europe.
In Europe, 2nd biggest port in Europe, but it's quite a bit inland. So the main shipping is the river coming in, the Scheldt, and that's a huge river, full of big boats. We came through on a Sunday, but even though it was a Sunday, it was still pretty scary and pretty big boats. We headed south, went down to Mons, and then we went down through, repeated a little bit of the cruising we did before, but this time we actually entered France on the Sambre River there. That's actually into France, and we did celebrate there. But that was round about there was where Deb broke her arm, fell off her bike, and but we had a fabulous couple of weeks there. Unfortunately, that whole time that Deb had broke her arm, we did have people with us on the boat, so we were able to move every day, and they were actually boaty people as well, so it was really good. And then we headed back west up through to Lille. We came back into Lille in France, and then we cruised around up to Dunkirk, and then across from Dunkirk to Dixmude to Vern, and then down to Ypres. And that's where our boat has stayed for the last 2 years. It's the crew from the barge rally. As I said, we went to the rally, and it really is just a big party. We have great fun, and not everybody there has their barge, but because a lot of people come and stay with people. But there was a lot of barges represented, and we had a great time. It's 4 or 5 days, really, really good fun. Somebody asked about how we paint the bottom of the boat. Well, that's how you paint the bottom of the boat. You actually take it out of the water, and you there's a couple of different types of thing, but this got lifted out. There's a 80-ton boat lift in this engineering place. And they lift it out and put it on stools, and then you can paint it. So there it is, all painted and cleaned, new anodes, and already back from the water. And as you can see from the photos, it's totally flat. It's absolutely flat. When it's laden, the boat will actually come up to the black line. So if it had 70 tons on it, loaded, that's where it would come up. We don't come up anywhere near that because we're only 45 tons unladen. So we only draw about 0.6 or 0.7 of a metre. So we can go into quite shallow waters. The couple of times we showed you photos of trying to clear the outlet or the inlet for the water water called exhaust. Well, with it out of the water, we found that in the inlet tube, which was about 1 foot long, there was a plastic cap stuck halfway up. So the water supply was only ever half coming through. And if anything at all got blocked over the bottom of it, it would just stop the water flow. So fortunately now I know that if I have that again, I can actually put a wire coat hanger down it, unbung it and pull it through. So every day you learn something on the boat. So that's all fixed now and works a treat. Doing a bit of maintenance on the stern gland, trying to get
which is under our bed, obviously.
Which is under our bed, because as you see, you get under our bed, which is it's a little bit awkward to get to, but lots of things come away, and it's the guys got there and fixed it up for us. A whimsical photo from Antwerp. And again, there's a common theme. Nice wine, outdoors, fantastic lifestyle. Cheese and bickies. This is in Antwerp Harbour, Willem Dock Harbour. Our barge is located up there. There's a very nice museum just where we're in on the 7th floor, and our barge is more just there. And the city centre for Antwerp is just to the right, about a kilometre walk. Beautiful. There's our barge, and there's our new bimini at the back, bimini across the thing, and then our panels on the side for sun. We just love that now. The boat's pretty much complete, and it keeps the back deck much, much cooler as well. So it's great. Some Kiwi visitors. And again, carrying more stuff. Deb, we saw some reclining chairs that Deb took a fancy to. And there she is trying it out. Tough life. Somebody has to do it. And we've had some spectacular sunsets. Here's a historic boat lift at Ronquier, not Ronquier's, at Strepitueux. Originally, these were built in the 1890s. There's 4 of them in a row, and they lift you a total about 80 metres, about 20 metres at a time. And they're hydraulic. And for those that are engineers, they're a fantastic piece of machinery, and it's a credit, to the designers that they're actually still working. You drive the boat into a tub. This is the new one that they've replaced, and there's 2 lifts. You can see the lift there. That's actually a bathtub that you drive the boat into, and that's they're about 180 meters long and about 11, 12 meters wide, and about 3 meters deep. And the big barges drive in there, and we drove in with them, and then they lift them up and down, and that's about 80 meters. And there's 2. There's one on each side. For the last year or 2, one side hasn't been working. They've been repairing it, but this side still works. And you can see these barges here, they just drive in there, tie up, boat lifts them up, off you go. Fantastic. If you ever get a chance to visit the machine room up the top, it's amazing. But here's the other barges. You're in a tub here as well, and these are hydraulic, and it has a cylinder, and they just pump water in, and it pushes you up, and they take the water out, and it lets you down. Very simple, but very, very well built. There's our barge moored up on the side of the canal. In the middle of the summer, it was beautiful. We ran through here. The weather was fantastic. This was on the Sambre River, still in Belgium. This is in Thuin. And the town centre's at the top of the hill. Beautiful little village. And this is the cast that Deb got put on and had it for 2 weeks while we had 40-degree heat. Not the most comfortable, I can assure you.
I cooked.
What?
I cooked.
Slowly basting. It was not very comfortable, but she didn't grumble too much. Boat jousting. This is really fun. It's a bit like the jousting on horses, except they have big sticks out the front of boats. Some boats they pull. These ones are the pull ones, but on the other boats, the guys row, and just before the point of impact, the rowers all lift their oars out of the water, and they brush very close to each other, and they try and knock each other off. It's great fun to watch. Great fun to watch. And these are just local villages. The villages compete against each other. Working in the engine room, as you can see, it's not a high engine room. This is just one of the things I wanted to do, was to put a new floor down. Because as you can see, there's all sorts of gaps and bits of wood. So I put a new floor down. And obviously the floor has to be removable if you need to get to work. So I fixed it all up. Always something to do, always working. And there's some guests sitting on the bow, enjoying the sunshine. Courtright in the Netherlands, in the France. As I say, it's just like a big caravan, floating apartment, we call it. And this was back in Ypres. When it rains, it's a really good time to wash the boat. And when it rains hard, it's even better because you don't have to rinse it down. So it was pouring with rain and we were about to leave the boat. So I was giving it a good wash before we left. And this is exactly where our boat still is moored, and still moored next to the boat next door. So, and this is in Ypres. Deb, over to you.
Yeah, so we just finished with a few summary information. So this is, again, the yellow is the country borders, but that's just showing you all the trips we've so far done. Mostly, as you can see, in the Netherlands, Belgium, but we've covered quite a lot of space there. Next. So our cruising summary, I'm just going to have to move things around so I can actually see this myself. So overall, we've travelled 3,500 kilometres on the boat. And I think one of the things we said, we always try and go slowly. So we have on average about 3 days in each port. And what that means is some ports we only stay overnight because there's really not much there, but other ports we'll stay a week or sometimes even longer if it's interesting, or we might be waiting for someone, a guest to arrive or whatever. And as you can see here, I don't know if you can see the with guests, we've had 60 days with guests. 41% of our time we had guests aboard the boat in 2019. And we found that completely doable as long as we have a gap between guests. What we found really difficult the first years is all the guests came at the same sort of time of year and we didn't have any gaps between them, which was really difficult. And generally we travel, we try not to spend any more than 4 hours on the boat. Of course, there are some days when you have to. And we usually travel around 20 kilometres, but of course it just depends on, where you're trying to get to, and sometimes there isn't anywhere to stop. Our longest cruise was 8 hours long, but a different day we travelled 51.2 kilometres, and that was actually with the tide. There's a river in the Netherlands called the Scheldt River, and it's a tidal river, and we gain about 5 to 7 kilometres an hour in speed when we're travelling with the tide along that river. Of course, you've got to be timing it well because you don't want the tide to be against you when it makes that much difference to your speed. Next, please. So we also use Moondance as a base in Europe, and we've been able to use it to do quite a few different things. So Howard, he mentioned already that he was managing the New Zealand team at the World Fishing Championships. We went to a Rolling Stones concert in Amsterdam, which is a bucket list item for Howard, and we hired a car and drove up there from Belgium. I've been down to France to catch up with girlfriends. Howard every year goes on a 24-hour fishing competition in the Netherlands with a friend of his. Howard's visited his son in London. His son was just there on a business trip, and he's also been to Ireland to fish with friends. You can see a recurring thing of fishing with Howard. And while he was away, I did an intensive French course in Montpellier in France. In 2018, we had a trip to Spain. We just flew down from where we were and went to Spain. And then in 2019, I left the boat a little earlier and I met some friends in Africa on our way home and did a photographic safari, which just made things easy. Next. So what are we going to do next? Well, obviously, our return to the boat has been delayed by 2 years because of COVID. Our kitchen was going to be installed by March last year, and we're still waiting for it to be installed. But we've told the people as long as it's in by the time we get back, we'll be fine. They've said by the end of this month, but haven't heard anything yet. So our original plan was to cruise for at least 10 years. So we figure we've still got 7 or more seasons to go. So we plan to keep doing it while we're still enjoying it. We still want to go to France. We have an issue about medical insurance because COVID isn't really covered under travel insurance. So we'll have to see what we do about that. And we plan to winter over in Paris in 2023. That coincides with the World Cup Rugby, which is in France. And Howard's family is all mad keen rugby fans. So we think that's our best chance of getting the family to come and visit. And we're hoping one day to get to the Canal du Midi, which is in southern France, World Heritage listed canal. And anybody we know who's been there says it's just absolutely fabulous. So we want to get there one day. Next. So I run a website and a blog. So while we're traveling, my job is actually to take photos and post them on the blog. I try to keep it up to date so friends and family know what we're doing. So if anyone is interested, you're welcome to have a look at the blog or even subscribe if you want to get notifications while we're traveling around. Next. Oh, so there's just a couple of shots about the blog itself. And the thing, we've got a lot of information on there about the history of the boat, what it looked like as a sailing vessel, what it looked like before we did the renovations, and what we've even got some photos from the family on there of what it looked like when it was getting renovated in the 70s. Next. That's just a blog photo. Next. So that's it from us. We're happy to take any or all questions, either now or at some future U3A event, or get in touch with us through the blog. So can we unmute everyone, Lynn?
You have to unmute yourself.
Okay, cool.
Just while people are doing that, I've got a couple of questions. There's two questions. You probably don't want or don't need to talk about the actual cost of the boat and the repairs, but the running cost. Do you have to hire, when you moor and you use electricity, do you have to pay for it, and do you have to pay for mooring fees? And
so we found mooring varies dramatically from country to country. In the Netherlands, most places we moor, we have to pay a mooring fee. Even when we're mooring somewhere like this, it looks like we've just moored at the side of the river, but someone will come and knock on our door and ask for money. It's usually about 20 euros a night in the Netherlands. In Belgium and France, there's much more free moorings, and we had much fewer days when we had to pay anything. Obviously, bigger cities like Antwerp, Amsterdam, Rotterdam, they charge you a lot more for mooring. I think we've paid up to 70 euros a night, but not very often, and we figure it's worth it to go to those cities. And power, if we get power, yes, we would be paying for that. Generally, we either pay by putting coins. Some of them have coin-operated ones, and other ones you just, they measure how much electricity you use and then you pay. But we've found in the middle of summer when it's sunny, just the solar panels and moving the boat around is enough to recharge our batteries. And occasionally we'll just use the generator as well, which is sometimes just easier if we're in the middle of nowhere. Where we are at the moment, we're paying mooring fees, and we're only paying 100 euros a month, which is unbelievably cheap for people who have had to pay mooring fees in Australia, I think.
And can you choose where you moor? Can you just pull up somewhere, or do you have to arrange that in advance?
So again, it varies by country. In the Netherlands, you're only allowed to moor at designated places. So, and because we're a large boat, sometimes we do call ahead and just make sure there is a space for us. In the Belgium and France, you can actually just pull up where you like, as long as it's safe and as long as it's not marked as no mooring. So we're probably less inclined to call ahead there and more inclined to just see where we go. But because most boats are under 15 metres, can be a bit of a challenge. The Barge Association, which we've mentioned a couple of times, actually has a mooring guide. And so we were able to use that to sort of get an indication of where might be a good place to go that has moorings for us. So we do a bit of planning to work out where we're going to go and where we're going to moor.
What happens to your wastewater and that? Is that not, doesn't go straight into the canals?
Well, we regulations for boats over 20 metres now require you to have a black water tank. And so because our boat is old, we didn't have a black water tank, and it was okay for us not to have a black water tank, but we decided we would put one in. But what we find is, even though we have a black water tank, we've never yet found a pump out station that we could get to easily to pump it out. So what we tend to do is when we are in port, we put everything into the black water tank. And when we leave port and we're on a canal or river away from people, then we'll pump it out. So at least we're not pumping out our waste where people are swimming or whatever, because we've been amazed at where people will swim.
It's
Is
actually-
it treated in the black water tank?
Sorry?
Is it treated in the black water tank?
No, it's
No,
just
no.
port.
It's just-
That's absolutely amazing, because I know on the lakes there's pump out stations everywhere, and they're trying to, because it's an extraordinary pollution process, isn't it?
Yeah, it's I think they've made everybody put the black water tanks in, and there are much stricter regulations in Germany. So I think eventually all the countries in the EU will introduce pump out stations at places you can get to. And we've stayed in a few places that have had pump out stations, but they're sort of in a little spot designed for a 12-metre boat to get to, and we can't really get to it. So in the end, we've had to pump out into the canal again. So I think
actually
over
interesting.
time they will be upgrading the facility, so you'll be able to just pump out and so forth.
I'll just make a comment. There's been quite a lot of studies done in Europe on the effects of pollutants from boats, and it's interesting the fact that they know that it's actually not the human issue. It's actually the actual cleaning stuff that people use, and the biggest one is the washing machine. The soap suds that people use. So there is a big push, and we certainly make sure that we use eco-friendly detergents and that sort of stuff. And we don't tip anything noxious into the water, but they've said that the actual sediment from human waste is is actually beneficial to the marine life. So
They say that the birds on the lakes, the birds are polluting more than the humans, although that depends on the number of boats. But the birds don't have to.
that's right. It's very interesting. But there is, as I said, I think, and Deb's right. I think in the future, as places become, Netherlands is a closed waterway, so it's all their water is sealed. So
And the Friesland, Friesland.
At Friesland, yeah. So it's just amazing that they do it. But
Tell me about the process of renaming a boat. When I bought my boat, I got all sorts of stories. I had to name it with the same letter, or I had to get a Roman Catholic priest, and there are all sorts of about it, and I want to know.
Well, when we bought the boat, we had it renamed at the time that we changed the registration. And then we did a little, our own, we were told by friends that we had to do this little ceremony where we had a little fake, we built a little model of our boat out of, I can't remember what it was, cardboard or something. And then we sank it. That was what we were told we had to do to stop it from being
very superstitious, a superstitious territory. So the other one, I forgot what I was going to ask there.
You asked how much the boat cost before. We managed to negotiate a price of €140,000 for our barge.
That's tremendous, isn't it? It's a wonderful. My boat was 9 meters, so it was. I thought it was huge, but I can't imagine a 22-meter boat.
Yeah, it's my parents struggle, and Howard always tells them it's as long as a cricket pitch. So
well, it's exactly 70 foot. Yeah.
It's just beautiful. Can't believe it.
Yeah. So it's basically a floating 2-bedroom apartment.
You got a navigation system on board? I presume you have.
We run a thing called PC Navigo, and that's actually designed it for European waters, and we can load all the maps of all the waterways. We put in the dimensions of our boat and say we want to go from here to there, and it will actually work out a route for you. If
this is via your phone or your iPad.
No, it's on a computer, and it links into our AIS and our GPS. So as we're going along, it's actually telling us where we are and where we're going to go. The AIS system that we run as well, will tell us of any big boats and where they are in relation to us. So while we're going, we have a map of where we are and where all the big boats near us are. So that can be very handy. So you don't want a big boat sort of suddenly appearing out of nowhere and tooting its horn at you, which we have had done when we weren't watching very closely. But if you're coming out of a side canal or something, you want to come out when there's no big boats coming towards you. So we've been able to use that, and we've gone, okay, we're just going to wait 2 minutes and then this boat will be passed and then we can go, because you can't always see it from where you are. And we've found that really advantageous, especially in the Netherlands and Belgium. We believe that in France, when you spend more time on smaller canals, it's probably less important, but where we've been, it's been godsend.
Are there any other questions from people?
No, but a fabulous talk. Really, really interesting.
Absolutely.
So Deb, I'm just planning the next program. I wonder, you know, we've seen a lot about the boat and everything. I wonder if you've got any photos of what you've actually visited, or if you feel like you'd like to dust down something and give us a talk next term while you're waiting.
Happy to do that, Lynn. I only have thousands of photos.
Well, anyway, look, we'll talk about it later. But as I say, that was most interesting, and I was fascinated and terribly envious, I have to say.
Yes, I feel the same.
But so I'll talk to you later about that. But
Yeah,
any
sure.
other questions at all? No? Well, thank you both. Howard and Deb.
I'd just like to say thank you.
Yes, may you get on board again sometime.
Soon.
Well, we're hoping for March. We hope to get back in March. It's a long time to leave a boat unattended. We're lucky that we're in a really good harbour. The harbour master actually lives on his boat in the harbour looking out at our boats. And we have friends in the boat next door. And we have the guy that's redoing our kitchen. So he drops in from time to time just to check that everything's dry and everything's working well. So we feel like it's in a safe spot. We're probably in the cheapest good harbour we've been in the whole time we've travelled, which was really just a matter of luck. Because as Howard said, we were originally planning to be in France this year, and the harbours in France aren't nearly as good as the ones in Belgium, from what we understand. So, so we feel the boat's in good hands, and we're dying to get back and return to our life.
You and
Thank
millions
you.
of others.
Absolutely, Patsy.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Yeah.